Alright guys, so in this video we're checking out the LiteRadio 2 SE from BETAFPV. So this is the upgraded version of the LiteRadio 2, which I reviewed a while back, and here's what it looks like. And basically from a cosmetic perspective it's virtually identical. They've made a lot of internal changes to kind of remedy some of the support problems, and that mainly has to do with the OpenTX that was on the original LiteRadio 2, which, by the way, this is discontinued. They are no longer making this, and this is the new model, and this is the only one they're making. And the old radio had the OpenTX, but because it didn't have a screen, it was really hard to make changes. You had to use OpenTX Companion, and without the screen, it's kind of difficult to manage the functionality of this radio. So they decided to go away from that. So this one has a custom firmware in here that's not OpenTX. It's totally different. So there's going to be a few changes in how it works. And basically, they summarize everything here in this table in the manual as to what the differences are. So operating system here, it's a custom system. I don't know what the firmware is. It's not open source. Obviously the old one's OpenTX. They have a bigger 1000 milliamp hour 1S battery in this one instead of the removable 350 milliamp hour 2S battery, so that's gone. These are the protocols in here. So it's actually switchable between FreeSky D16 FCC and LBT, FreeSky D8, Futaba FHSS, and Bayang. Those are the protocols that are supported on the new version. And then the old version, I think what's missing here is the Futaba one, even though it's basically the same chipset. So the old one, obviously they don't sell anymore. Same 8-channel radio. RF power has been increased to 100 milliwatts from 80 milliwatts. So if you're having range issues before, maybe this might help a little bit. The additional 20 milliwatts, that does put it on par with like most multi-protocol modules, for example. I've never had any range problems with the original, so it kind of really depends on your RF environment. Everyone's situation is going to vary a little bit. And then because of the difference in the battery here, the working time they're saying is up to 8 hours instead of 3 hours. It's probably something less. I didn't really run it all the way down, but I'm imagining it's probably more like 6 to 7 hours instead of 8 hours, probably 8 hours maximum. It really depends on how far away you fly stuff too. So if you're using this continuously and you're at a further distance, it's going to reduce your power on time versus something that's flying much closer. So the USB charge is different now. So instead of the micro USB, they have a USB Type-C on the bottom. And then they have this audio jack here, which on the old version was for trainer port. On the new version, it just says it's audio jack. Where is it? Right here, audio ports. It doesn't say what it's for because the student radio mode is no longer supported. So if you want to use it for a trainer, that's not supported on this new firmware. But the port's still there, and I'm not sure what it's there for if it's not for the trainer port. So not exactly what's up with that. And then the HID joystick function still there. Of course, you can just plug that into your computer via USB Type-C cable, and it'll show up as a joystick for a simulator, and it works great. And then for joystick calibration, there is a procedure in the manual for how to calibrate the sticks. That was a big problem with the old version because you had to use OpenTX Companion, and that was usually that led to problems with a lot of customers because they didn't really understand how to use it properly and ended up actually bricking their radios. So that's the big reason why they avoided going with OpenTX and just using a custom firmware. And then of course firmware updates they said are available here on this new one. Of course this is brand new, so there aren't any firmware updates yet. Whereas in the old one, there were no firmware updates available. So I just open this up here and to show you quickly what's inside. So I already took the door off for the battery. So this is where the 350 milliamp hour battery was for the old version. Of course, this is an empty space now, so you could stick stuff in there, but then keep in mind there's holes here that stuff might fall inside, so be aware of that if it's too small. You might be able to put like extra whip batteries in there or something like that. That's if you want to use that. Obviously they're reusing the mold here, but the internals are going to be different. So you're going to remove all these screws. There's 2 here, 3 on each of the handles. So a total of 8 screws. You remove those, and then this is what the inside looks like. So there's a battery here on this taped to the back cover here, like this. So it's going to be obviously plugged in, right here on the board. So obviously it's not, you know, when you pull it off, you're gonna have to be careful not to rip the plug off, but, you know, actually gently pull the plug off on your own. And then the back cover will come off. The gimbals are the same as far as I can tell. They feel the same, they look the same. And so I imagine, you know, there's going to be really no difference there. Same with the switches. You got the same 2 position switches here on the left and the right, and then 3 positions on top on the left and the right. And that's in terms of the auxiliary channels, this is aux 1, aux 2, aux 3, aux 4 right here. And I think that's exactly the same as before. But the main board, of course, is going to be different here on this version with the Type-C connector for charging. And it's got a buzzer here. There's no haptic feedback, like a vibration thing, as far as I can tell. It's just a mix of buzzer noise. The haptic feedback thing on the old version actually was taped somewhere in here on the handle, and it kept coming off in a lot of the models and rattling around. I think they got rid of that feature. I'm going to put this back together and I'll show you how this works. Oh, and by the way, you know, if you want to put more batteries in here, you can probably put extra 1S batteries on each of the handles here, and then combine the 3 batteries in parallel, and then they'll probably give you more power on time if you want to do that mod. Some of you guys that are a little bit more skilled should be able to figure that out. It's not that difficult to do. Obviously, if you're a beginner, you probably don't want to mess with the battery and cause a potential fire. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't do that. Okay, so when you power it on, you're going to get flashing red lights, and then the number of flashing red lights will indicate which protocol is currently active, and this also indicated in the manual. So basically, if it's flashing 1 time, it's D16 FCC, flashing twice, it's D16 LPT, 3 times, it's D8, and then 4 times, it's going to be FHSS. And then once it's done flashing red, it'll flash blue, and then you hear 3 beeps, and then it'll actually all booted up. Okay, so go ahead and press the button. 3 red flashes of blue, and then we got your 3 beeps, and then a solid blue light. That means it's all booted up. So you saw the 3 red flashes. That means that we are in D8 mode, as you can see here. Now, if you want to switch protocols, you have to power the radio off, press and hold the bind button while you're turning the radio on. And so basically turn off the radio, press and hold this bind button. You're going to probably need like a screwdriver or something to press and hold that in. While you're pressing and holding that down, you're going to power it up, and then the number of flashes will change. So it just basically goes from, so if I did that, it will go from 3 flashes to 4 flashes, and then it'll go back to 1 and 2. So you just do that one at a time, and it'll rotate through these 4 flashing lights for these 4 protocols. Now, if you want to bind once you're powered on, so if you're powered on, you want to bind, gotta make sure your power is on. Press the bind button, and then it'll turn that blue light into a flashing red light. So press like that, get a flashing red light. So it's in bind mode right now, and then eventually it'll time out. But if it does finish the bind, it'll go back to the solid blue light. It does say that if it's successful, it'll turn blue. It'll turn blue no matter what, if it's successful or not. It doesn't stay in bind mode forever. It's like 10 seconds, I believe. Okay, so to turn it off, you just press and hold the button, and it'll turn off. 3 tones, and you get no lights. That means you're powered off. So I did test this with a number of different receivers, XM Plus, a bunch of Whoop, like built-in SPI receivers in D16 and D8 mode, and they all work fine. None of the calibration was needed, like everything was nice and centered out of the box. But if you do need to do calibration, there is a procedure on how to do calibration here. It's in section 8 of the manual, but it's not going to be really necessary. But if you want to, well, at least when you get brand new, but if you happen to go in that isn't for some reason, this is the procedure to go through to calibrate the sticks. But I'm pretty sure most of you guys are probably never going to have to use this. Okay, so like I said, I did test this with a bunch of different receivers, and actually bound it up to one after another after another. So if you guys are wondering if it'll work with multiple receivers, as far as I can tell, it should work with an infinite number of receivers, because I think what it does once it binds, it's the receiver is actually storing the transmitter ID in the receiver, and there's no like model match in this because there's an OpenTX obviously. So I was able to basically keep binding models and every time I unplugged the other one, plugged one in, then it would still just work. It would just connect. So, which means you could do funny things like, bind up 3, drones and try and take them off all at the same time. You could do that with this radio if you want to, but obviously for practical purposes, it's going to be impossible to fly all 3 at the same time. But you could do that if you want to do that for basically for fun, but I wouldn't recommend doing that with anything other than something kind of tiny. Big drone, you're going to probably crash and cause problems or crash into things, and it's probably going to be pretty dangerous. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. But yeah, in terms of binding up with multiple models, not a big deal on this one. It works fine. Even when you switch from D8 to D16, what it seems is it doesn't matter because the transmitter ID is stored in the chip on the radio, and then that gets stored in the receiver. So it really depends on the receiver you're using. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. I believe the price is the same as well, $39.99. So should be the same at BETAFPV and also whatever retailers they're selling this at. I know that there's a lot of other options coming out now in terms of different radios, similar radios like this for like beginners. I think the jumper with the T-Lite is probably going to be like the next step up from this. I don't have that radio yet, but I should be getting it soon. It's that one, comes in 2 versions. One with just the same chip that's in here, so you're limited to basically the FreeSky type protocols. And then there's another version with the 4-in-1 module, with the full 4-in-1 module, so we'll bind up with things like Spectrum and FlySky. And there's differences in prices, of course. So I think the low-end T-Lite's coming in at $60, and then the 4-in-1 module version comes in at $80. So basically you're jumping up in price for each step up in functionality. So if you just want the really basic functionality, something like this is going to be fine for most people. They're just starting out. $40. Want to move up to the next step, it's going to be $60 for the OpenTX basically version of the Jumper T-Lite with just the FreeSky module inside, and then another $20 it moves you up to basically the full setup where you have the full OpenTX, the full 4-in-1 module, and it's going to be this similar light gamepad style format. So if you're looking for something like that but you want the full functionality, then I would recommend just going straight to the T-Lite at it's about double the cost. It's about $80 versus this is about $40. So if you're just going to be flying above some whoops around indoors, this is going to be totally fine for that. But of course, if you want to move up later and just want to save up that extra $40, I would recommend going that route versus something like this. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.